first introduce clicker training to your horse, it's best to start out in protected contact. That's with a barrier between you and the horse. So no matter how well you know your horse and how safe you think they are, when you first start introducing food rewards, they can sometimes offer some unsafe behaviors like this. Inoki bites. So you see this overexcitement and somewhat dangerous behaviors. Not really what we're looking for when we start training. So if this happens, this is why we use protected contact. Protected contact limits his opportunity to perform behaviors that might be dangerous or might make me uncomfortable, so he can focus on the behaviors that I do want. So this is a new horse I'm introducing positive reinforcement to. And as you can see, we're in protected contact. But as you can also see, and I'm pointing this out because some people may not be thinking about this, this is not an ideal setup. So we have another horse right here. And as you can see, there's some resource guarding going on. So this is not how I would want to potentially introduce positive reinforcement training to a horse, especially if they already have food issues. So when you set up your environment, you want to make sure that there aren't any other horses right nearby that are going to cause some of these behaviors that you're seeing. So if you're working with a horse that makes you a little bit nervous about hand feeding, if they bite or they're too excited around the food, then not only do you start in protected contact, but you can also deliver reinforcement in a bucket instead of by hand. So here's another example of introducing food and training to a horse who is a bit aggressive towards people.
But you really want to reinforce
Exactly.
that. Yeah. So
Try again.
yes. Good boy.
So sometimes making that jump from protected contact to free contact might be a little too much of a jump for your horse. So I've come up with some intermediate contact. Crimson here isn't too crazy about the food, but sometimes he still needs just a little bit of a reminder of where he's supposed to be. So this works quite well for that. So, you want to definitely be aware of how difficult this is for your horse. And if you're not in protected contact, and your food is right here in your horse's face, now that might be very difficult for your horse. Just move your treat pouch. Make it easier for your horse. Here, right here. There you go. Good boy. There, see? Problem solved. So, food values, very important, especially when you're working with horses that have food issues already, like Inoki. So as you can see, he's really excited about the food, this stomping and all this movement. The food value is way too high for him. So I'm going to switch to something. Right now what I'm giving him is a concentrate, so it's very, very high value. So I'm going to switch to something else. What I'm going to start giving him now is alfalfa pellets mixed with chopped hay. And you'll see very quickly how his behavior changes and how he becomes much more relaxed. So you can already see that there's not quite as much energy in his movement. Still doing a little bit of stomping. That's going to go away soon. So much calmer overall, much less movement, much less snatching at my hand, and you can see the stomping's gone now. Boy. So all I did was change the value of the food, nothing else. You may hear people talk quite a bit about rate of reinforcement. So rate of reinforcement actually is, I like to think of it as the horse's rate of success. So success breeds confidence, and I want a confident horse. I want her to know exactly what the behavior is that I want, so I want her to be highly successful. If I pick my criteria, which is standing with face forward, just like this, and she's struggling with it, she's turning her head away, it means my rate of success isn't really high enough. I want it to be higher than that. I want to be feeding her more often. So instead of waiting, I'm going to click more often before she has a chance to turn her head away. So this right here is a high rate of success and a high rate of reinforcement. You can see she's not turning away, she's not doing anything else but standing with her face forward, which is exactly where I want her to be. So you have two different ways that you can feed your horse. One of them is underhand with your inside hand, like this. And the other is overhand with your outside hand, like this. So I find that underhand feeding with your inside hand tends to put your horse in an awkward position and makes them grab at your hand, which with a horse like Gunner, who would happily take your entire hand into his mouth at once, might not be what you want. I prefer to feed with the outside hand, overhand feeding. In order for me to feed him, I have to turn my body, and this keeps his neck and head where I want it. And placing the food out in front of his face keeps him from grabbing at my hand that he can't see. Here's another example of underhand feeding. Feeding with the inside hand. You can see how awkward it tends to be for Inoki, how much he tucks his head, he's looking for the food. He's a little bit more excited about the food than Gunner. So the potential for me getting bit feeding this way is pretty high with Inoki. Oh boy. So this is overhand with the outside hand feeding. And you can see the difference. We get calmer behavior, keep his head where I want it to be, and much less of that biting behavior. Good boy. We are marking for behavior and feeding for position. So if I want my horse to stay like this, like Symphony here, I'm going to feed her out here instead of feeding her here close to my body. If I feed her here close to my body, then she might start looking for food on my person and mugging me, something that I definitely don't want. So I feed her out at arm's length. Sorry, Sim. If my horse is right on top of me and I don't really like that, and I want them to back up some, if they don't know to back up yet, I can use the placement of the food to back them up. Likewise, if the horse is too far away and I want them closer to me, I might feed them up here to get them more into a closer position. So wherever your horse is, you mark for their behavior. You can adjust where they are by how you feed them. So when you mark and reinforce behavior, you want to be very clear with your mark. So if you watch my hand and you listen for the click, what's really happening here is that my hand moving towards the treat pouch is what's marking her behavior, not the click. So you want to make sure that your click comes first, and then you reach for your treat pouch. If you need to be really fast, you might consider preloading your hand first and then marking and reinforcing. But again, you want to make sure that you're not moving your hand first before you click, like I just did there. You want to make sure that you click first and then move your hand. So see this nice lovely nibble nibble chomp that he does?
I was going to say, is she a biter?
Nibble nibble nibble. No, now he's not going to do it. Ah, there he goes.
Yes,
So there's two different ways that you can fix this. The one that most respond to is you just get a big handful and you press up into their lips a little bit. With him, that doesn't work. He'll still do the chomp, see? So with him, I gotta get a big handful, let him nibble, 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 and then drop my hand away before the bite.
Interesting.
And then you see how he settles right down, he stops doing it. So he gets a little nibble, and then I just take my hand away before he chomps down. So another way to slow down food aggressive horses that can be a little overexcited and nippy is to present the back of your hand first and then flip it over when your horse is calm. Good boy, Noki. So you can see he slows right down and he stops trying to grab at my hand. Good boy. Very nice. Good morning. Last but not least, it's a good idea that when you finish training with your horse, that you have a nice clear end of session cue so that your horse knows that they're done and that reinforcement's no longer available. So Robin Hood, I just tell him all done and give him a jackpot on the floor and let him eat while I walk away.